This episode of the Star Wars Battlefront podcast is brought to you by our patrons on Patreon. Head over to patreon.com/Battlefront podcast to support our show. The Battlefront podcast is also brought to you by Star Wars Uplink, Titus Sheep Entertainment's new podcast hosted by Sage Goodwin and Jared Bilby, covering everything Star Wars gaming, past, present, and future. Search Star Wars Uplink on your favorite podcast app and look for the tie-dye.
Activate your personal shield and get your trait to level 3, because it's time for the Star Wars Battlefront podcast.
I really like the little flourishes that you add to the game modes. Like in Bespin, they've got like, what if the Empire actually took over Bespin? I think that is just crazy. And I think you did very well with the Battle Station game mode, how you were adding that. And whose idea was it to make the explanation for the removal of helmetless stormtroopers?
I think that was actually it was probably me during when we were authoring the patch notes and everything, because we're always careful, like how we know one side of our player base is going to be ecstatic about this change, but maybe there's like a different part who might not be as vocal in defending it, but now would get really upset that you have to keep your helmet on. So we were really careful, and I'm not sure. Like we felt like we could go in one or two directions. Either we went in this direction with just male and female, but helmet stays on, or we go. And we pretty much just allow all kinds of troopers to remove their helmets. So you'd see shadow troopers and shock troopers and scout troopers, and all of them. Just like you can customize your head as much as you want. That would have created a lot more customization options. But I think we were sort of weighing those two against each other, and I felt no. I actually think it's better to listen to the feedback of our players, and I think I mentioned it during the live stream that it's important that it's still a sandbox. You can wear whatever you want. Like if you want to play as the Emperor on Hoth or Boba Fett on Hoth, it's fine. Like that, they were never there. But like if you want to play as them and create your own story, that's perfectly fine. And the same with and the same with other customizations, like the Cloud City Wingguard outfit, or having scout troopers in other places than Endor. Like there's so many different interpretations of what is Star Wars lore and what's accurate as Star Wars fans, and we just felt like that's fine. We have to keep that rule, but at the same time, when we were getting that feedback that the Stormtroopers no longer feel like Stormtroopers because they don't look, like a Stormtrooper because everyone's running around without their helmets, then that's a different matter, at least to us. And then we felt like, one of our core pillars is authenticity. Like every single sort of weapon or object that you encounter in the game should feel and sound like the real thing. And if Stormtroopers no longer feel like Stormtroopers, then we need to act on that one, and we need to adjust. And that's why we made that decision to, let's helmets on, everybody. The officers are here, and that was just a fun gag. And it's still a game. We shouldn't take it. There's a lot of things in the world that we need to take a lot more seriously than games. So let's have some fun.
That's what Colby Boothman was saying, like how when they were recording for Luke Skywalker, they had to change the original trilogy fight style is very very strict, so they had to take like leniencies when they were recording it to make it more fun to play. Because if you're just standing like right next to each other sword fighting, it's not as fun as like poking people with sticks.
Yeah, like that first stiff fight between Obi-Wan and Darth Vader. Like that's not.
Yeah. They're kind of like, you want to go first or me? How's this going to go?
Exactly.
You talk, I talk. What?
Yeah.
How important was it for you guys to bring space battles to Battlefront?
Super important. It was one of the first things that we decided on doing for when we sort of created the roadmap for the expansions. And, it was alongside, skirmish or what was previously known as instant action. Space battles was right up there in terms of the two sort of these things. The fans are really asking for these two things. And so something we really wanted to do. We thought we feel like it turned out great. Like it's we could have made just a space battle expansion like from the get-go, and you'd be doing nothing but flying in space. We elected to this is still an infantry shooter at heart. And so we wanted to still have a component that's, infantry based. I think it's now down to about, if you look at the Death Star playlist, it's about 60 to 40 in terms of, 60% flying, 40% infantry.
Yeah.
We might do some tweaks because I read quite a bit of feedback that people feel like there's not enough, infantry experience in there. So we'll look at that.
Sam's one of those.
Yeah. And we'll adjust. But at the same time, the reason we went for, the planets that we had in the main game was because they all sort of catered to the same type of game modes and the same type of infantry experiences that, it works well across all 4 or 5 maps or 4 or 5 planets that we had, Jakku included. But now for the DLCs, certain game modes just won't work.
You can't have Walker Assault on the Death Star.
or in Jabba's Palace, even though it'd be super cool. but it wouldn't work. And Lucasfilm just agreed with us that, we can't do that. We can't squeeze an AT-AT into those tunnels. It just won't work. So we have to make, I guess, hard decisions in that, like, okay, these types of experiences we can't really do within the space. And I know people who really love this particular mode from the main game can feel like, but I want, this or that. And we try to get as much as possible. But no, in general, this was the space pack. That's not to say that we won't ever do space again, but this was the big space map and we know there's a large group of people who play a lot of fighter squadron. They just want to stay in their X-Wing or in their TIE fighter, just duke it out all night long. And, this is a pack dedicated to them primarily, but at the same time, we wanted to give some stuff for everyone to enjoy, which is why we did the whole the rescue phase where you have to rescue R2-D2, which was a lot of fun to create.
It seems like you guys had a lot of fun because that game mode is just so action-packed.
Yeah, that's good to hear.
And I love. Have you played the space battles on the original 2 Battlefronts?
Sure.
Recently?
Probably not this year, but I definitely played it during development of the original game.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you guys got rid of that kind of style because I can't play it like that anymore. You guys have just set the standard, I think, for space battles. It's just really well done.
Thank you. It's always tricky to you can't argue against nostalgia and what people grew up playing, and I'm the same. Like I grew up playing the original Quake 1. I just can't play another Quake game because they can't compare to the thing that I grew up with. So I fully get it, I respect it, and I will not ever try to argue against it. For the game that we're making, we focused. It's always been about like creating these fronts of engagements where it's just like one side spawn opposite the other, and then you just like it becomes a massive fight in the middle where it's just like trying to push through. That's always been the focus of our game, rather than maybe the originals had more spread out engagements and a lot of just running around a large open map, and we just wanted to create more action-packed moments where more standoffs, and that's always been a key driver for our game modes. So it really wouldn't make sense to have people spread out against on multiple ships, and like have that stuff where it becomes almost like your own journey as you're fighting against AI or something like that. You just want to create something where everyone's really engaged and the objectives are clear, right in front of you, easy to get to, and sort of push people through a story together, rather than having everyone just spread out and do their own thing.
Yeah. And I used to love space battles was my thing when we were playing the original 2 Battlefronts, and then we recently found a PS2 at a garage sales in our town.
Oh, cool.
And then we got Battlefront 2 for it, and we went to play in space battles. Like, everything else was as good as I remember, except for space battles. There's just the mechanics don't really age well, like to other things, I think.
Yeah,
they need to nerf the AI in that.
No, I know everyone will do it, but it's not really fair to anyone to compare games that have been like so far apart in terms of when they were developed and for what crowd and what expectations they had. These days, the Star Wars franchise is a lot different than what it used to be. I'm sure back in the days of the original Battlefront. So, the world has changed. It's just, you can't really make a fair comparison between the two. It's just like there's been like multiple console generations even. So it's just I know it's inevitable because we're sharing the same franchise name.
Yes.
But it's still going to be, it's a different audience and a different Star Wars franchise that we're dealing with these days.
Yeah, I got an email about that. They're like, this isn't the old Battlefront, da 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 da. And I was like, dude, they're trying to do something different, and if you don't like it, you can go play the old ones like you want to.
Yeah, but we're hoping that we can get everyone happy and not ignore nostalgia and things that people grew up on. We're all. I mean, like I said it at the top of the show. This is a dream scenario to be working on Star Wars, and the main reason is because I grew up with Star Wars, like so many others, and so I will never disrespect or disregard people's feelings towards like what they grew up on and what they imagine that they would see. I think eventually we'll get to a point where everyone's happy. I think during the course of the DLC campaign, we've certainly learned a lot about our fan base, our player base, and I think we're in a good place. Like, the community seems very pleased right now, and the future is very bright if you're a fan of Star Wars Battlefront or Star Wars games in general.
Yes. And we were talking with our cousins. They came to visit, and we had them on the podcast. We're talking about like the Death Star, our speculation, because this is before it came out. And
Sure.
our cousin was like, "I just want to see the black of the Death Star floors. That just brings me so much nostalgia."
That's cool. I hope we were able to deliver on that one.
How is you guys have been experimenting all throughout the DLC, and then you come to bring this 30-minute 3-phase game mode. How was that?
I think it's just like I said, we do have we do have a large crowd of players who really wanted space battles. We also have a large crowd who wanted infantry combat. We also were sort of looking for a way to get even more Star Wars story into the game. Not necessarily like act out the movie, but feel like you're playing a scenario. Like you look at Outer Rim and the extraction game mode we made there. That one is very plays out, and it feels almost like an episode of Star Wars Rebels.
Yes.
Like where they enter a dangerous place, and then they just have to bring this thing to their ship and get away before the Empire arrives, pretty much.
And we don't know what's under that tarp. That is just so fun. It's like, what is under there? Why are we doing this? It's because we're the rebels and we got to take our stuff back.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe they are ion disruptors. Maybe there's something else. We'll see. And this was just. I knew there were some key points that we really wanted to hit. People have been asking for capital ships within the play space so that you can fight around a capital ship. So that was really important to start us out. At the same time, I really wanted a scenario where, we would be extracting a VIP. I don't think that's something, you don't see a lot of games doing VIP escorts a lot, just because of the potential for trolling and people ruining the game mode for everyone else. But we really wanted to try that one, and it made sense. I've been wanting to get R2D2 in since the start of the game, and I'm just thrilled that we were finally able to bring him in and make him a playable character. And then, of course, for the third phase, you can't have, if we wouldn't have the trench run as part of your space battle experience on the Death Star, then it wouldn't have been right. So we just felt like it needs to end with the Death Star. That needs to be the quest, and it needs to be the end goal. That's sort of how it came about. It was also interesting to see, can we have an actual boarding scenario where you would go from a space battle, and then next have a cutscene, a transition of you entering the Death Star, and then have you go boots on the ground, and now you're inside the Death Star and you need to do a different scenario. We played around a little bit during the Bespin expansion, where we had those. It wasn't like a multi-stage game mode in the way that the Battle Station is, but it's still, it starts out with one set of mechanics or a quest that you need to do, in that you need to take out this Tibana gas generator. So once you've done that, now you need to fall back and defend your extraction point. So we were sort of playing around with that idea, and that went over really well. People really enjoyed Sabotage, and then we just felt like, okay, this seems to be the right track, and we'll probably continue doing that in the future.
Yes, that is. I love the Bespin DLC. It is really good.
Cool.
So how has working with Lucasfilm been?
A lot of fun. A lot of, I learn things every week. It feels like understanding, since they're not, it's such a large franchise, and they deal with so many different content creators of Star Wars. Yeah. Like, it's not just video games, it's TV shows and toys and
the books,
amusement parks, books, everything. Like, there's so much, and understanding that for us, Battlefront is like everything. That's our entire days and nights even are filled with Battlefront, and that's everything that we think about. But from their perspective, like, it's such a large franchise, and understanding what things are super, super important to the franchise, that it's portrayed accurately, and that we're doing justice to that component of Star Wars, and also understanding where we can be more free to pursue whatever gameplay needs we need. That's been really interesting, and getting them to it's always been a great relationships, but I feel like throughout the course of the expansions, we've grown even closer, and they have a lot of faith and trust in us that we are able to deliver iconic things in Star Wars and do them justice. Like, R2D2 is probably one of the most important characters in the franchise, in terms of like how he needs to be portrayed accurately. Like, the droids are actually really, really important to Star Wars, as I'm sure you know.
Yes.
So that was a lot of fun, being allowed to make Chewbacca, who's also very iconic. The TIE Advanced. There's so many really, really important, iconic things that we've been able to make, and So that's been a lot of fun, and like I said, the future is really bright because we keep learning things about not only our players but also like the franchise at like a deeper level than maybe you might learn just by watching it, and then also Lucasfilm and how to collaborate with them as effectively as possible.
Why did you guys decide to do the first Death Star?
I think it just had we not done the trench run, like I said, it wouldn't have been the Death Star without the trench run. Yeah. It is the most iconic part. It also allows us to introduce some new hero ships, which when you look at what's important to, like in terms of vehicles, what are the most iconic vehicles in the Death Star that you think about, then obviously Red 5 and TIE Advanced are right up there. And that was just, it made more sense to go with the fully constructed Death Star as opposed to the second Death Star.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we do sort of have some we pay homage to the second Death Star.
Yes, I love flying through that section.
Because again, that's just something where, we get it. It wasn't shown during the Death Star 1, but since it was on the second Death Star, it's quite feasible that they had structures similar to that during the first Death Star on the first Death Star too, because it's pretty much the same plans. It's just bigger. Yeah. And so that made sense to everyone. And like when you look at the capital ships fighting around you during the diversion phase, the first one, it looks more like the Battle of Endor, in that there's a lot of capital ships around, Star Destroyers taken out, Star Cruisers and all of that. So it's more of a visually it's the first Death Star, but in terms of like what's there and all of that, it's just it's our interpretation of the Death Star.
Yeah. So did you have the issue? Because when I was growing up, I always thought that the second Death Star was just the first Death Star that got blown up.
I don't know. I'm not sure.
I think I just had a breakthrough.
There you go.
This is like up until now, when I started like 3 years ago, I started like getting really back into Star Wars and like researching the crap out of it, and then I find like it's the second Death Star. I was like, what? It's not the first one blown up and in pieces? It just blew my mind.
There you go.
Have you seen the glitch where you can play as Luke or any other hero on the Death Star surface?
Yeah, I noticed that one. There's a fix coming in as soon as we can get it. It's not like game breaking or anything, but it's mostly just funny to see it.
Yeah.
That one just slipped through the cracks, that you can remain. If you stay within the hero selection screen, and then during the phase transition, you can still spawn in. That's just unfortunate that it slipped through the cracks, but we'll get them all. They just like
you got to squash all those bugs.
Yeah, they keep popping up.
So gotta catch them all, the glitches.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so before we let you go, I have some questions from our listener, friends of the podcast.
Sure.
So here's one from a Rogue 27. You can tell from his name that he loves Rogue Squadron.
That's good to hear.
So he wants to know, did you fall in love with Star Wars when you were young, or when you began working on the project?
I grew up really enamored by Star Wars, but I think I actually, like a lot of passions in life, you sort of it comes and goes.
Yeah.
I've been a huge fan of the Warhammer franchise. I play a lot of Warhammer Fantasy, and now the new Warhammer Fantasy that's come out. So that always became, I think, my franchise of choice. I really enjoyed fantasy a little bit more than I enjoyed sci-fi. But then, leading up to, we were supposed to start working on Star Wars, and then you come back to it and it feels super familiar, like you've never left. And that's when I think I fell in love again, and now it's become like so big for me. Just like looking around my office at home, it's just that we got so much Star Wars everywhere, and like I told you that story about my kid, and my wife is into it, and it's just now it's become definitely the franchise for me. So no, it's been it's definitely been like a renaissance for me, and returning to Star Wars has been a lot of fun.
You had a Chewie we're home moment.
Yeah, exactly.
And then I've got two more. Okay, so
Sure.
This one's from Gregory. He's a friend of the podcast. His username on Twitter is 1010_57.
Cool.
Okay, he wants to give you a big thanks because I was a kid of the 70s and 80s, making his childhood dreams come true, and he's played over 350 hours.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you, thank you so much for me. That's super fun to hear.
And he's still into it as he was day one, and he wants to know regarding the heroes and villains, what was the process for choosing which to include? Was it a developer vote, a matter of which were easier to code, or something else?
So many different factors, not just what we want to do, but also what makes sense in terms of the future of Star Wars and things that Lucasfilm might be looking at, and things like that. Nyan Num has become larger and larger within the Star Wars franchise. He's slowly growing, gaining some steam, and I think sort of those curveballs can be a little tricky to understand as players who might not be sitting on the same knowledge. So it's always like a combination of what's going on in Star Wars right now, what's coming up in the future, and there's always development like issues that like some things might be like you have to make hard decisions sometimes, and that we really felt like we really wanted 2 new heroes for the first Outer Rim DLC, but we also knew that that one was coming out really soon because our players were screaming for more content. And that was just something, okay, well, what can we do? What are the things that we can realistically finish in time? And like we already had like a variation of like the Celestin head, for example, so that we had some work already done, but then we had to make everything else. But at least we could like shave off a couple of days here and a couple of days there and actually deliver on time. So there are some development sort of problems that you have to take into account. Whereas you have to sort of weigh different options against one another, and that we really wanted a hero and a villain for each expansion. We feel that that's quite strong, and people are really excited to see them. But we could maybe have gone for much more technically challenging heroes to make, but then maybe we would have gone without a hero and a villain for one of the expansions, but then have someone more technically challenging. But but I'm not sure if people would have liked that. They probably would have said, well, that's the wrong decision. You should have focused on getting us a lot of them instead. And so you always have to weigh those things versus one another. And we felt like getting a hero and a villain for each expansion was really important. So let's make that.
Okay, and from DJ Royski, he wants to know what the ring planet on the Death Star DLC is. But I remember from the live stream that you said that it's a mystery planet.
For now.
Okay.
We'll see about the future, but no, we're not ready to share the name of that planet just yet. We'll see what happens in the future.
It looks awesome.
Kind of like Doctor Who's name. You'll never find out until they...
We'll see. But no, for now, it doesn't have a name.
Okay, cool. Is it canonically possible to have a pauldron on the Shadow Trooper?
Apparently, they don't have them.
Okay.
So that was one of the issues, really. For now, we're focusing on the regular Stormtroopers and having them get some pauldrons. We'll see. Never say never, but that's not currently in the plan. So we're actually running out of space for more customizations in the game. Like I'm not sure if we can have many more costumes. I had to pull a lot of strings to get as many as we could in for this one. But yeah, we'll see.
I love the X-Wing fighter suit for that, and I love how you can have any alien head now. Like, I love the Bespin wing guard with the Celestin head. I think it just looks so funny.
Yeah, he almost looks like a servant, like he's there to serve you drinks or something. I like him.
That's it for this episode.
Thanks for listening. This episode of the Star Wars Battlefront podcast was brought to you by our patrons on Patreon. If you want to support the show, go to patreon.com/Battlefront Podcast.
If you want to be a guest on the show, you can contact us, battlefrontpodcast@gmail.com. You can leave feedback there as well. Talk Battlefront and Star Wars. If you want to be on the show, have the subject line podcast guest, have a topic and a Skype account ready, because we do this podcast guest episodes through Skype.
If you want to follow us on Twitter, it is TieDyeSheepYT.
You can talk Star Wars there. I've been tweeting a lot about the Rogue One lately. That trailer is awesome.
You can also follow Sage on Instagram at TieDyeSheepFilms.
Yeah, I've been posting a lot of different stuff that we've been doing for the podcast there. I actually won a giveaway from Audio Technica. I just did a post on that. And then you can follow Sam. It's at chef_wanna_b. What do you do there, Sam?
Post different various food pictures. That's about it.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Okay, so we have a thing that we do before every podcast. It's a little start card for our podcast, and we would like you to do it. Would you be interested?
Sure.
Okay, so you're going to say, activate your personal shield and get your trait to level 3, because it's time for the Star Wars Battlefront podcast.
Wow, that's a mouthful.
I can write it down for you if you want.
Okay, do that.
Okay. Activate.
I'm not sure that's considered writing it down.
Here we go. So I'm just going to read it out for you. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay.